Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're going to begin chapter 2 from Canto 4 today, from Brilliant as the Sun, Retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna fulfills all desires. Chapter 2, which is Daksha curses Lord Shiva. At a great sacrifice in the heavens, Daksha offends Shiva, leading to an angry encounter between the celestial sages and the Shiva followers. Vidur frowned. How could Daksha have driven his own daughter to commit suicide? Verses 1 to 3, he said, Daksha surely loved his daughter. Why then did he disregard her feelings and antagonize her husband, the gentle Shiva? How could he find fault with someone as auspicious as Shiva, the spiritual master of the entire world? Shiva is no one's enemy. He is peaceful and self-satisfied. Indeed, he is the greatest of the gods. My dear Maitreya, to part with one's life is very difficult. Please explain how such an elevated son and father-in-law could have quarreled so bitterly as to make the great goddess Sati kill herself. Listen carefully, said Maitreya. I will relate the whole story. Verse 4, the 4 sacrificial fires blazed up, chants of Swaha Swaha resounded as scores of priests poured in ladles of ghee. Many other Brahmins sang Sanskrit hymns, and as they struck bells and gongs, the sound reverberated around the magnificent hall where a great concourse of sages, philosophers, celestials, and fire gods sat along with their many followers. Verses 5 to 7, Daksha, the leader of the Prajapatis, walked in. His head held high, his effulgence illuminated the entire arena, eclipsing everyone else's presence. With the exception of Brahma and Shiva, the assembly rose out of respect. Brahma, who was presiding over the sacrifice, warmly welcomed him. He turned toward his aides and instructed them to garland Daksha and offer him the formal reception. In the midst of resounding applause, Daksha walked toward his jeweled golden seat. Verses 8 to 9, smiling and nodding to the assembled gods and sages, Daksha was about to sit when he noticed Shiva had not risen to honor him. His eyes flashing with anger, Daksha straightened himself and strode to the center of the great hall. He raised his arms and exclaimed, all sages, Brahmins, and gods present, please hear me carefully. I wish to speak about the manners of a gentle person. I do not speak out of envy, nor am I ignorant of right and wrong. Verse 10, Daksha did not look at Shiva as he spoke. By his unmannerly behavior, Shiva has spoiled the reputation of the universal governors. He is obviously shameless and has no idea how to act properly. Many in the assembly gasped loudly. Why was Daksha criticizing the gentle Shiva? Verse 11, Daksha raised his voice. He has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter. You know this, for you all were present at the marriage. Posing as a well-bred man, he wed my daughter, who is equal to the goddess Gayatri. Daksha turned and glared at Shiva, who looked at him impassively. Verse 12, Daksha seemed about to explode. Look at him, his eyes are just like those of a monkey, but he had the audacity to marry Sati, who has eyes like a fawn. Still, he does not stand up to receive me, nor does he think it proper to welcome me with sweet words. Some in the assembly tried to placate Daksha. You offered your daughter to him. Now please sit down and let us begin. Verse 13, Daksha frowned at them. I had no desire to give him my daughter. Just see, he ignores all social rules and regulations. He is impure. I never wanted Sati to wed this uncivil man, but I was obliged. It was a great mistake, like teaching the Vedas to an unqualified Shudra. A few objected, how could he compare the god Shiva to a Shudra? A few objected, how could he compare the god Shiva to a Shudra? Verses 14 to 15, Daksha sneered at the objectors. He lives in filthy places like crematoriums. His companions are ghosts and demons. He runs around naked like a madman. Sometimes he laughs insanely, at other times he wails and cries. He smears himself with ashes and does not bathe regularly, as would any gentleman. His ornaments are garlands of skulls and bones, although his name is Shiva, which means auspicious. He is quite the opposite. Indeed, he is mad. Only other similarly crazy beings in the lowest mode of ignorance like him. In fact, he is their leader. A voice rang out of him from the assembly. Then why did you give him your daughter? Verse 16. Daksha whirled round to face the speaker. Even though I knew Shiva to be unclean and full of bad qualities, I reluctantly handed him my daughter on Brahma's request. He scowled at Shiva, who remained peaceful, looking away to avoid confrontation. Verse 17. Daksha took it that Shiva was snubbing him. His face bright red, he marched over to a small Achman water pot used by the Brahmins for purification. Sipping water 3 times, he cursed Shiva. Verse 18. The gods are eligible to share in sacrificial oblations. Shiva, however, is the lowest god of all. He shall therefore no longer have a share. So this is the curse Daksha pronounced on Shiva. Verse 19. A clamor arose from the assembly. Many gods implored Daksha to relent, but he ignored them and stormed out of the arena. The colossal man-bull sitting at Shiva's feet, which is Nandi, suddenly roared, sending shock waves through the assembly. Shiva placed a hand on his mighty shoulders to pacify him. Nandi, be calm. Do not attack them. It's fine, Nandi spoke through clenched teeth. I will not harm them, my lord. I merely want to ask them a question. With reddened eyes, he rose to his feet, looking around the assembly as if to burn them with his gaze. How could you allow Daksh to curse the Lord, great Lord Shiva, with such harsh words? Some shrugged their shoulders. How could we stop him? He is our leader. Verse 21. Nandi let out a short laugh. His master was too forgiving. These fools deserved no mercy. His deep voice boomed around the arena. Due to identifying with his mortal body, Daksha hates Lord Shiva. I curse him and anyone who considers him superior to my lord to become blind to spiritual truth. Some of Daksha's Brahmin friends called out, shame, shame. How could you insult Daksha? His seniority is not without reason. He is famous for perfectly observing the religious duty of a householder. Verse 22, Nandi snorted. If a person follows the rules and regulations of married life because he wants to enjoy material happiness, then his religion is merely a pretense. Such people only superficially understand the Vedas, robbed of all good intelligence. They will become absorbed in karmic activities. Verse 23, since Daksha identifies with his material body and has forgotten that the goal of life is to awaken our love for Vishnu, he is infatuated with sex. I therefore curse him to receive the head of a goat. A cry of protest rose from the assembled Brahmins. He is an exalted progenitor, a highly learned Brahmin. Your curse is unwarranted. Verse 24, Nandi stood tall, flexing his broad muscular shoulders. It is perfectly justified. Daksha is as foolish as a goat because he thinks that the Vedic sections dealing with the material prosperity are real knowledge. Frowning, the Brahmins looked at one another. Now he blasphemes the Vedas. Why does Shiva not silence him? Shame on him. Hearing his master criticized, Nandi's nostrils flared and he pointed at the dissenting Brahmins. For insulting Lord Shiva, you will take repeated births and deaths in this world. The gods gasped. Such a harsh curse. Verse 25, Nandi's tone was defiant. Those who criticize Lord Shiva are infatuated by the flowery words of the Vedas, which promise temporary material enjoyment. May such foolish people always remain lost in materialistic activities. The Brahmins waved their arms in protest. Remove him, he offends the Brahmins. Verse 26. Rounding on them, Nandi retorted, you are Brahmins in name only, for you study the Vedas and perform austerities simply to fill your bellies. I curse you to lose your discrimination as to what can and cannot be eaten. You will all beg door to door simply to get money to gratify your senses. So Nandi's fury continues. Verse 27, the Brahmins roared in fury, seeing no one restraining Nandi. Their leader Bhrigu stood up. I have till now constrained myself, yet I see Shiva does not check his servant who is unjustifiably attacking us, feeling now the wrath of the Brahmins whose curse is insurmountable. Verses 28 to 29. He snapped his sacred Brahmin thread and exclaimed, I curse Shiva's followers to become atheists. Opposed to the genuine scriptures, they will foolishly imitate Shiva by keeping long marriages. They will indulge in wine, meat and other habits. Shiva's many hobgoblin and ghostly followers shrieked in protest. Brahmins are meant to be tolerant and forgive. Where is your self-control? Bhrigu looked at them with disdain. By blaspheming us, you reject the Vedas, which we follow. Therefore, you are already atheists. Shiva's followers stamped their feet and waved their fists. Then the Vedas must be nonsense like you. Verse 31. Bhrigu smirked at Shiva's followers. What a motley collection of reprobates. Unwashed, intoxicated, improperly dressed, with bedraggled and knotted hair, they were disgrace. He said, you berate adherents of the Vedas only because you cannot follow their principles. The scriptures are given by the Supreme Lord himself, who is everyone's protector. They are faultless, and cultured people have followed them since time immemorial. Shiva's followers howled and jeered. Verse 32. Bhrigu pointed at them. Witnessing your ghoulish behavior, I can understand why Shiva is known as Bhutpati, leader of the lowest. Mark my words, as you blaspheme the Vedas, which are followed by the pure and saintly, you shall undoubtedly become degraded atheists. The hordes of ghosts and goblins uttered discordant sounds and jumped on their seats. Nandi tossed his horned head and flexed his muscles menacingly. Verse 33, Shiva's face fell as he witnessed the rising animosity between his followers and the Brahmins. Fearing the cursing and counter-cursing would escalate, he rose abruptly and left the assembly without a word. His followers scurried behind him, sometimes turning back to shake their fists at Bhrigu. The rays of the rising moon shone through the tree boughs and danced on the rippling pond. Vidur's eyes were fixed on Maitreya, his expression one of shock and curiosity. What happened to the sacrifice they had been performing? Verse 34. The universal progenitors completed it without further incident. Was it not invalidated because both Daksha and Shiva left? No, because they performed it to please the Supreme Lord. Therefore, despite Shiva's departure, there was still no imperfection in its completion. Verse 35, when it was complete, the gods took their final ritual, Avabhrita bath, at the confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna. Purified in their hearts, they departed to their respective abodes. So we will begin chapter 3 next time, talks between Shiva and Sati. Thank you for joining. I am Hare Krishna.